Hello, everyone. I'm Jonathan,
I'm Ben.
and we would like to welcome you to the premiere of The Detectives Show. Today, for the first episode, we will be diving into the disappearance of the president of the Teamsters, Jimmy Hoffa.
This is gonna be an interesting one. I've read about this one. I've watched videos. I saw you saw The Irishman, right?
Yeah, it was quite some time ago, but I like that movie. All right, so let's get into the case. So on July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa was last seen in a suburban Detroit restaurant. He was declared missing the day after. Hoffa was never seen again, and the case remains a mystery, still to this day. But if you may not know, who was Jimmy Hoffa? Jimmy Riddle Hoffa was an American laborer who was the president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters from the years 1957 to 1971. Hoffa was known to be one of the most controversial labor organizers during this time. The Teamsters were a labor union for drivers. As president of the union, 90% of the American transportation was controlled by the Teamsters. Hoffa worked to defend the Teamsters from raids by other unions. He would also be involved in turf wars with rivals in the Detroit area. According to sources by an author, Hoffa would then get involved with the mafia to get rid of the other Detroit area unions. In his control of the Teamsters, Hoffa was usually accused of association with the mafia. After being re-elected as president of the Teamsters in 1961, Hoffa began working on expanding the union, and 3 years later, he would bring all truck drivers in North America under an agreement, which was known as the National Master Freight Agreement. People will claim this as the biggest achievement in a lifetime of union activity.
That's pretty cool. That definitely sounds like a pretty good deal. So definitely was successful for him and others too. So, yeah.
Hoffa would then be arrested in 1967, sentenced for 13 years for many things like bribery and mail fraud. In 1971, less than 5 years in his 13-year sentence, Hoffa was pardoned by President Richard Nixon and was requested to not be in any union involvement until 1980. This restrainment from Nixon to Hoffa would have a negative impact on the Teamsters. A couple of years later, it was discovered that the biggest pension fund of the Teamsters was stolen. It was hundreds of millions of dollars. And a couple weeks after that, Hoffa had vanished, to never be seen again.
Okay, that's odd because like the timing of those two occurrences has to be more than a coincidence.
Well, I mean, my first guess would just, if there was hundreds of millions and I vanished, I'm somewhere in Mexico on a nice island.
But I don't know. I mean, there had to be something more, like, maybe something like more than we know. It's just more. It has to be more than a coincidence.
Oh yeah, definitely. It makes things more suspicious now. With Hoffa not allowed to be involved with the union and no longer in prison, we suspect the mafia might be involved. On the day Hoffa was last seen, Hoffa was scheduled for a meeting with two others, Anthony Giacalone and Anthony Provenzano, who are suspects in his disappearance. The meeting was to take place at 2 p.m. at a Detroit suburban restaurant, the Mattress Red Fox. Both Giacalone and Provenzano were both in the mafia. Hoffa's wife would get a phone call by Hoffa, who seemed annoyed and called from a payphone near the restaurant. Hoffa would then state that Giacalone and Provenzano didn't show up at the restaurant for the scheduled meeting. Giacalone was at the Southfield Athletic Club, and Provenzano was not in Michigan but instead New Jersey, with his brother playing cards in a union hall. After his call with his wife, people witnessed Hoffa in the restaurant parking lot standing next to his car and pacing around the parking lot. It seemed like he was waiting for someone. Hoffa was a very well-known person, so he's recognized by witnesses. It was also witnessed that Hoffa was being picked up by a Mercury with 3 others inside. With him entering that car, it was possibly the last time Hoffa was ever seen. At 7 a.m. the next day, Hoffa's wife called her children to tell them that their father did not come back home. Hoffa's car was later found in the parking lot of Matches Red Fox and was unlocked, but there was no sign of Hoffa around, and the police were called. The main big piece of evidence the police were able to get was a maroon 1975 Mercury, which fit the description of the car Hoffa was last seen in. The car had belonged to Joseph Giacalone, son of Anthony Giacalone. The car was borrowed earlier that day by Charles, aka Chucky, O'Brien. O'Brien had borrowed the car to deliver fish and was also the proclaimed foster son of Hoffa. Before Hoffa's disappearance, Hoffa's relationship with O'Brien had started to get worse, and it had worsened over time. According to Hoffa's own family, they believe O'Brien was involved with his vanishing. It was discovered that Hoffa's hair was in the car and police dogs were able to find Hoffa's scent inside. His hair was both in the backseat and in the trunk, which is suspicious to know.
Okay, so if O'Brien was in the car when picking up Hoffa, it would make sense from the get-in because obviously Hoffa probably wouldn't enter that car in a dangerous situation unless there are people in that car that he trusted, And obviously O'Brien, was a surrogate son to him. And even though their relationship was getting worse and worse at the end of the time, but he still would be more comfortable entering that car, being around someone he knows and trusts. Would you do the same?
Yeah, that makes sense. If not technically family, but someone you consider family is there to pick you up.
Somebody
it's still a little, it's a little odd that he would leave his own car behind, though, for me.
But it's I wouldn't. If it was something I knew, something not, I would, if I wasn't comfortable seeing people that I didn't really know. Obviously, I wouldn't get in that car But if it was your surrogate son, maybe if your relationship was I don't know how you call it, worsening, I guess. Yeah. Obviously he knows him, so obviously it would make sense for him to enter that car. So that's probably what led him into the car. So.
Yeah. Hoffa's body was never discovered. What many people agree on is that Hoffa's death was tied to the mafia in some sort of way. Now let us enter theory time. The first theory we have is that Hoffa was killed on the orders of Anthony Provenzano. He was one of the men Hoffa scheduled to meet with on the day he was last seen. Mafia hitman Charles Allen, who served prison time with Hoffa and who was involved in the Federal Witness Protection Program, told the story to the U.S. Senate Committee in 1982, 7 years after Hoffa's disappearance. Allen states that Hoffa's body was ground up into little pieces, sent to Florida, and thrown into a swamp to never be found. However, the FBI were never able to find a good amount of evidence to support Allen's claims. Others do believe Allen was making up the whole story to try and make some profit. The second theory we have is that, according to a former assistant to Hoffa, Joseph Franco, in his book Hoffa's Man, he stated that Hoffa was abducted by federal agents, taken to a plane, and dropped out of it midair, possibly landing into one of the Great Lakes surrounding the state of Michigan. Franco told the United Press International in an interview that he thinks Hoffa's disappearance was a covert operation, and also stating that he witnessed the abduction take place. Franco said, quote, "Stop and think. The 4 most powerful people in America this century have all been assassinated. Jimmy wasn't murdered, he was assassinated. I'm talking about the leaders. Martin Luther King Jr., John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Jimmy Hoffa." End quote. Other than the words of Franco, there's nothing else to support this claim about Hoffa. The third theory we have is that Hoffa was killed by hitman and serial killer Richard Kuklinski, also known as the Iceman. Kuklinski was being interviewed for a book by author Philip Carlo. Kuklinski was involved in many hits, just like the former head of the Gambino family, Paul Castellano. Kuklinski was even hired to physically torment and kill the neighbor of mob boss John Gotti, because the neighbor had accidentally run over Gotti's child. While being interviewed for a book, Kuklinski had claimed he had killed Hoffa for a pay of $40,000 by the mob. The man who gave the order was Russell Buffalino, a mobster who was the crime boss of the Buffalino crime family. He had stated that he was in the car that had picked up Hoffa outside the restaurant where he was last seen. Hoffa was then beaten up and stabbed with a knife in the skull. Once it was all done, Hoffa's deceased body was sent to New Jersey inside a car trunk that would later be crushed and sold as scrap metal. Officers have believed that Kuklinski was telling the truth about the story. However, others do not believe him, as Kuklinski is known to be a pathological liar.
The obvious thing about these cases is that you never know if somebody's telling the truth. You never know if somebody is telling the truth or lying. So it's kind of hard to tell. So I think their facial expression could give it away, maybe, have you been able to tell if somebody was lying or telling the truth?
No, I mean, there are people that pass polygraph tests even though they are lying. There's good liars out there.
Yeah.
Especially for someone like Kuklinski, who's a serial killer, they could just want the attention.
Yeah. But let's be for polygraphs are bullshit, so I don't believe in. They can be bullshit. I don't believe in them. But definitely, it's either for attention, money, probably just the fame, But he is pretty. You never know.
Yeah. The fourth and final theory we have is that Hoffa was killed by Frank Sharon, or better known as the Irishman. He killed Hoffa on orders from Russell Buffalino. The mob hitman claimed before his death in 2003 with author Charles Brandt from the non-fiction memoir I Heard You Paint Houses that he had killed Hoffa on July 30th, 1975. The same day Hoffa was last seen alive. Sharon was an enforcer for Hoffa and Buffalino. It was said that Hoffa used Sharon to get rid of Detroit area rivals of the Teamsters and was able to secure Hoffa's leadership in the Union. According to Sharon, while being interviewed by Brandt, after they picked up Hoffa from the Matches Red Fox restaurant, they drove off to an empty home in northwest Detroit, where Sharon shot Hoffa 2 times when he entered the home. After Hoffa was killed, his body was cremated at a mafia-controlled funeral home. Sharon stated that he felt guilty for betraying Hoffa, and they were close friends, but he did so because he would have been killed if he refused or didn't do it. Sharon had tried to send a secret warning to Hoffa by sitting in the front passenger seat in the car drive to the house from the restaurant. As to why Hoffa was killed, when Hoffa's crimes caught up to him that sentenced him for 13 years in 1967, he was pardoned by Nixon if he stopped involvement with the Union until 1980. Hoffa knew he couldn't stay away for that long, so he tried to return and had plans to become president of the Union again. Russell Buffalino, who co-ordered the hit on Hoffa, was worried that Hoffa would give out the information to the Justice Department in exchange for lifting the restrictions that were put on him by Nixon. Buffalino didn't want this to happen, so he ordered the hit on Hoffa and had Sharon do the job. Buffalino was determined to silence anyone who tried to reveal their plans and activity. But ultimately, in the end, as of now, this case is still a mystery and probably will remain like that for the rest of time.
Yeah, this is going to be a case that's going to just remain unsolved, but if somebody solves this, kudos to them. But I mean, the one I believe in the most, I feel like the Irish one makes the most sense because, he was going to die in a couple of weeks. He died like a couple of weeks after that. He was interviewed for the book. And He probably just wanted to confess to his death. I heard he just wanted to, I think because he was religious. I think he wanted forgiveness from God. So I just don't think. I don't know. I don't know. For me, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but maybe it just I don't. Does it? Do you think it makes sense to lie before dying? Because I think if you want to get famous, because obviously he's gonna die. I think he just wanted to confess. Have the case try to be
The
over.
peace of mind. Yeah, that would make the most sense to me. He's not trying to seek attention or
Yeah,
popularity or anything
he
like
just wants.
that.
He just wants to. That he's just trying to confess, But like I said, like what I said earlier, you never know. Like maybe lying, but I personally believe he's telling the truth. It makes for some reason it makes sense because obviously the body was never found, and it was cremated because it's like if it was cremated, it's ashes now. So it's probably it's gone. It's just ashes. Like it's probably in the ocean right now or something or in the lake because they were in Detroit. So
Yeah. Yeah, to me the last theory makes the most sense. But I mean, no matter what, at least I feel no matter what, the mob was involved.
oh yeah.
It just don't know which version to believe.
Yeah, but we just know he was killed in a way. He was killed. He's dead. And he would have been. He's dead anyways because how old he would have been, like 105 or something. Like he's dead for 1,000,000%. He's been dead at least, even if he's still alive. Well, or if he didn't die on that day. But I personally believe that the Frank Sheeran one, the Irishman theory, is true. Well, I don't know if it's really a theory, but the confess, I believe he was telling the truth. I personally believe it. It makes
I
so
do
much
as
sense.
well. Yeah.